Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us. I wanted to talk about regrets. I know we've talked about it before, but the reason I'm thinking of it is, it's kind of funny, but I got a thing in the mail. I'm due for my 25-year pin in the union. And so I'm going to go get my pin, and my friend is also getting his the same time. So I'm kind of excited. But what made me think of regrets was I realized here I am, I'm in my 60s. And yes, I've been doing this job for 25 years, but there was a big time when I wasn't doing anything that I consider worthy, that I'm proud of, like I am of my work now. And what my regret is that I didn't get help sooner. And I think there's a lot of survivors that probably have that same regret. And I know I had so many reasons why I didn't get help sooner. I know there were a lot of things stopping me, and I could go on a list of them. But the main thing is it didn't get any easier by waiting, and it didn't really change much by waiting, except I wasted all that time in the meantime.
I think that's really hard because it's easy to speculate how things could have been.
Mm-hmm.
But also there's something about the process and the timing. The relationship you were in might not have been able to handle you getting well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of things that kept me from dealing with it sooner.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess my regret is that I wish I'd realized sooner how much it affected me and how much I could change, how I could work through that, and how it would make things so much better for me.
Mm-hmm.
By getting help, by dealing with my issues, and I'm very thankful that I did. When I did, I know one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast is to help people, inspire them to get help, because the sooner you do it, the better you'll have less regret about waiting so long. I think so many survivors wish they could have taken care of their issues sooner rather than wait. And often we wait until we have to for whatever reason, because
we often don't change until we're in too much pain.
Yeah, we're in a crisis because of the way we're coping with things is forcing us, into an unhealthy situation. And so we have to deal with it. And I know one of the reasons it took me so long, and there's so many reasons it took me so long to get help, but I know one of them, and this is the one I'm kind of the most ashamed of, I guess, to say, is it's easier not to deal with it. It's just easier. If you don't deal with it, it's so much easier. At least you feel like it's easier. And all you're dealing with is your coping mechanism. And so you don't have to deal with what happened to you and addressing it and all the fears you have about talking about it. It's just easier. And I'm sure that was the main reason it took me so long.
Well, and that's why we have such a problem right now with addiction and drugs, is people are numbing because they don't want to face the situation. And I can tell you through my recovery journey, there were several women that said to me, "Oh no, I've been through this once. I'm not going to face it again." And then they chose to live with. And when we come from trauma and pain, we can tolerate more than the average bear. And so we will tolerate and tolerate and tolerate because that's what we've learned. And
Hmm.
I think one thing I've really noticed with working with people in addiction is, we always hear rock bottom. People don't get help until they
Yeah.
can't move forward. And I think that's sad. I can count on one hand out of the hundreds and hundreds of people I've coached of people that actually made a decision to get well versus ending up in jail. The women always say saved by jail or ending up with an overdose. And so I think that it is interesting that you have regret, but I think it's actually like a very normal.
Yeah, it is, but it is important to talk about this because I think the key is so there's a lot of reasons that made it hard. I was protecting my family. I was worried people wouldn't believe me, or I was worried they would overreact, and that's part of protecting my family. And, I was worried that they would think I was going to be a perpetrator because often for men, especially, I think you think people think you're going to be an abuser or you're going to abuse, and you're afraid they think that, or that because you were abused by a man that you're gay or you have gay tendencies because you were aroused, all these things. And waiting to talk about it didn't change those things. They were still there for me. And what happened is you just realized they didn't affect you as much as you thought they would. So you just dealt with, and I didn't have people that questioned me or doubted me. I had people that actually believed me. People didn't think I was gay. All these things I was worried about didn't end up really needing to be worried about.
So it's almost like your fears of how people would react kept you silent more than anything. Like your belief system about the abuse is kind of what kept you silent.
Yeah, that's very much it. My fear of people treating me differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was coping well enough, but the ways I was coping wasn't helping me, was holding me back. And I think that's true with so many survivors. Maybe they have different ways of coping, but they're all keeping them in this pattern that isn't healthy in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's hypervigilance or hypersexuality or other effects of PTSD, your flight and fright is hyper advanced, or, you're just super inhibited or super aggressive. There's all these ways that we deal with it that aren't healthy to us and also affect our relationships. But all those things that I was afraid of, when I faced them, they weren't that bad. They really weren't as bad as I thought they would be.
Yeah. I thought people would blame me, but the reason for me why it took me so long is I honestly just thought that was normal. I didn't even know, and it was when I had kids and people kept saying to trust my instincts. So one of the things is our mom used to push us down the stairs, whatever. And so if my kids were misbehaving, my instinct might be to push them. Now, I never did, but that's what happened to me. And so I started to think something's wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is and then I started to have extreme panic attacks. But up until then, I even had gone to counseling in my early 20s and looked at family history, but it didn't come out then.
Huh.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
We talked about there was a lot of suicide in the family. There was a lot of dysfunction, but the memories of the abuse never came out with my counselor. And I do believe she was safe, but it never came out. So it wasn't until I started to have those panic attacks and started to remember things that then I went and got help. And so I know that I was numbing in different ways. I didn't use drugs and alcohol, but, I had my own coping skills.
Yeah, and that's what holds you back from getting the help you need.
But it shows the strength of the belief and of the holding on to it.
Yeah.
Like we protect it. So crazy.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I think for men, there's a lot of reasons we have for being secretive that don't affect women as much. And so when I found out, when I started talking about it and I found out I didn't have to be afraid. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to be a perpetrator. I knew I was pretty confident in my own sexuality. I didn't have to worry about what other people thought of me and so forth. So it really, I guess when I started talking about it, what it did was it boosted my own self-confidence because it forced me to look at who I really was in light of what happened to me, but also in light of what I thought people would think of me. And so I got more confident in myself because I realized, I was more aware of who I really am and how these things weren't necessarily true about me.
And what a burden lifted, because when we're holding on to secrets, carrying that heavy burden, it affects us physically and in so many ways. And to think what a burden, it's like you feel like this heavy sigh of, oh my gosh, I can let go of all of that.
Yeah, and you could start, working on yourself. And that's where it all started, was with this 25-year pin. I was thinking, boy, all those years I spent just struggling because I didn't have confidence in myself. I didn't trust myself. I didn't think I'd ever be good at anything. I had all these self-talk that was so negative, and most of it came from all the lessons I had learned being a survivor and having family with a lot of different abuse. And it helps so much to recognize that the sooner you start talking about it, the sooner you realize what is actually your truth and how it's different from the truth you've had in your head all along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, I don't know if I just said this, but I thought I'd be blamed because I did believe it was all my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to say anything would just mean that would be, to me, like cementing it. Like, I thought that, I was hoping it wasn't, but there it is. It is all my fault, and I'm a horrible person, and I think maybe that's why it took so much for me to get to a point where I could finally begin to remember and get help.
Yeah, I know it was awfully hard for me to talk about when I had been trafficked, because I know part of what held me back was the feeling that it was my fault for not realizing that was happening. It was my fault for not knowing what I was getting into. And I used to blame myself for that. And now I see I was groomed. It wasn't me at all. Mm-hmm. But that kept me from wanting to ever tell anyone about that for a long time.
Yeah. I remember somebody I know that had some repressed memories was reading an article, and it said you might have some sexual abuse and it listed like 20 different behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And she's looking at him going, oh my goodness, because she didn't have the memory yet, but she had all these certain symptoms and behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what got her to finally go and get a counselor and get some help.
Yeah, I think what I would tell any man listening is a lot of your fears are pretty valid in a lot of ways, but you can still get through it, and you'd be surprised how little you actually have to fear those things. Now, there's certain things that are very scary when you first tell, and certainly you want to make sure you're telling with a safe person. You don't want to end up in a situation where you keep getting someone that doesn't believe you or blames you or any of those other things.
And you may not get to a point where you're not afraid, but I always say, be the superhero you need and do it afraid.
Yeah, as well.
Because I was terrified when I first started saying things. I was terrified, but I'm still so glad I did it, even though I was scared.
Yeah. And I think it's, practically impossible not to be afraid to talk about it. But I think what matters for me is I didn't have to be that afraid. And I learned that the more I talked about it. And then it freed me to talk about and get the help I needed.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about having regrets that you wish you would have, what do you do with that now? I mean, you don't want to really live with regret, right?
No, so and I, it's not a regret that it really bothers me. I think it bothered me more when I first started getting help and I first started dealing with it and first got my life going. And I was like, geez, I wasted so much time. It was harder then. Now I understand why and the process I went through, and I'm a lot more aware of what was happening and how being a survivor affected me. Mm-hmm. And so I give myself grace. And I understand. I think it is what is the incentive for me to do this podcast, is knowing that once you get freed, you'll just be so much happier if you do it sooner. I mean, the time to talk about is now. And if you can't find anyone safe, just start looking for someone safe. Start the process somehow.
There's a saying, when you're ready, the teacher will come.
Yeah. So if you haven't told anyone, maybe write it down. Maybe start steps working towards telling someone. But the time to do it is now. Don't wait for whatever signs, or just find out how you can talk about it, who's safe. If you're afraid of affecting your family, there's ways to do it privately. There's ways to do it so they won't have to know you've been talking about it. There's certainly steps you can take that will help you, but you don't have to reveal it to everyone. You don't have to make it, this giant thing that everyone talks about.
And on the Male Survivor site, you can be anonymous, right?
Yes, you can be anonymous and write your story there. And just writing it and putting it publicly is a start. That's the start to getting the help you need, finding out who you can trust, getting the help you need.
And I think on that site, if you were to put your story, people might start commenting and you would start to feel validated, right?
Yeah, it depends on which forum you post. There's one forum that you post on that is just your story standalone. And I believe that's the one that's just called My Story. It's like your first time post, you post it there. And then when you post in the other forums where people chat, people will comment. You can post things about what's going on right now in your life, or what you're upset about, or what's, what you need help with. And people will comment. People will chip in and tell, or even just support you or give you encouragement. It's a great place to sort through stuff. But it's a start. I think for everyone needs to find someone they can trust, that they can share with, and hopefully, if you can afford it, if you can find a therapist, get therapy.
Some people worry that if they are remembering, they worry that maybe they have to confront, because we kind of live in this world of in your face and confronting, but that might not be part of your story. That might not be something you have to do. So put that on the back burner, put it on a shelf, and just think about, before any of that, just speaking your truth. Just finding a place to say what happened and not have to worry about repercussions in the beginning is very helpful, because I think there is sort of this thing with media and with the way social media is, even like one of the ways we came to say, let's not call them our rapist or our abuser, is because people like, and my abuser and I got in his face. We don't have to do that. And I think there is some, it feels like in this day and age that there's some maybe pressure to do that or to be that way, and we don't have to. Like, eventually, if that's something you want to do, you can do it safely with a counselor or a policeman, whatever it takes in your family. It's not a first step. And so if that's something that's holding you back, that you're worried about confrontation, then put that on the shelf and just tell the story to somebody who can hear it, or put it online at Male Survivors, or find a place where you can do it safely, because the first time it comes out, it's going to be pretty ugly and messy.
Yeah, in many ways. You're probably going to react, and it might get really intense for a while, and you might need someone there to just support you through the mayhem that might occur, or it might not be as dramatic as you're afraid of. It might just be a way to work through these things. And so I think just the first step is, don't wait, do it now. Do whatever you can do now, whatever is doable now for you.
Yeah, we believe in you. We encourage you. You're brave, you're smart, you're strong. You've already endured so much that this is nothing compared to what you've already dealt with.
Yeah, I think that's another important thing for me that I realized, is what I'd been through was so much harder and so much worse than what it took for me to get help and address the issues I was having. And then it was like, well, I can do this because I've been through so much. I know I can handle it. So I just encourage you, find the means that works right now and start. And if you have no one else, reach out to us. We'll listen to you. We'll hear your story, and we'll believe you. We'll be there for you. So.
And on our webpage, we don't talk about this very often, but we do have a lot of resources on our No Longer Ashamed, I think it's .org webpage. So you can get some resources. And also, we talked with those lawyers, and they help people. If it's something that you feel like you're going to need lawyers, we have resources there. So books that you can read to help support you. So go find the resources and take care of yourself. And man, like Kevin said, the sooner we get to the other side of this, the more free we can live, the better life, the better quality of life we can have. I know even though I still struggle with hypervigilance, I don't know if that ever actually all goes away, but it's very different now that I'm on the other side. Before, I was so scared and I didn't even really know what I was looking for. Now I recognize, I usually have to, in a restaurant, sit where I could see the door. And now I'm like, wait a minute, I don't really have to be watching the door. But before I didn't know why, I just knew I had to, and I was nervous all the time. So now I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I don't have to do that. Like I can actually recognize it. And am I still anxious? Yeah, a little, like I say, it doesn't just go away, but at least now I have understanding to go along with it.
Yeah, and that helps so much. I mean, certainly there's a lot of things that still affect me and trigger me and so forth, but just recognizing them and recognizing when it's happening. And for me, I know so much more about myself and what I can handle and what's hard for me to handle. And so I know when to prepare for being in certain situations, and that helps me. So it changes a lot. It doesn't necessarily go away, but it changes a lot as far as making it so you can handle it.
I feel like it gives us choice. And when we're stuck, we haven't told our story, we don't have choice because we're, like you said, fight or flight, the amygdala is always on guard. But once we start to tell our story and we get out of the past, and you had said this a few weeks ago, you talked about getting out of the past to the reality of the now. Yeah. And because when we get triggered, our brain actually thinks all that abuse is happening again. It believes that it's totally in danger of that. So when we begin to get well, then we have choice and we can sort through and we can recognize and we can be more present and make better decisions.
Yeah, I think, the feelings I had of it just being easier not to deal with I wasn't paying attention to what I was dealing with, which is all those feelings of panic, flight, all the self-doubt, all of that. Mm-hmm. I thought it was easy just to not address it, but what was happening was I was just bouncing from one situation to another, not being in control of any of it or of myself. And so it isn't easier not to deal with it. It just compounds. You just continue to get in situations that you can't handle or stressful for you, and you're unaware of why. Like you were saying, you don't always know why you're having these problems and situations because you're not looking at them. You're hiding them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it really affects our relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's hard to have a real honest, loving relationship when we are hiding all these secrets, even though we're doing it because we think we're protecting our family or we think we're keeping ourselves safe. Secrets don't hold up. And in recovery, they say we're only as healthy as our worst secret. So as long as we have these secrets, we can't really get well.
Yeah, we just keep hiding it.
And Kevin and I have said this before. You might be in a situation where speaking your truth is dangerous. There's help for that. There is support and help. There's the crisis hotline. They have resources. If you have to go somewhere, get away for a while, that's a possibility. You don't have to just hold on to it because it's not safe. There's actually, because people are talking about it more, there's more resources. There's safe houses if that's what you need, if you're a teenager and you're in a home that's unsafe. So there is so much more. When I was a teenager, I tried to tell my youth leader, and you know what she told me? To pray for my dad. Acts 16:31, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved and your house. And they didn't know back then. Yeah. They just prayed for them. And I'm sure I didn't actually say the words of what was happening, but I tried in my best way, but I couldn't be heard or believed. And I don't think back then I would have been believed. I think we've come a long way and there's way to support.
Yeah, there's so much more. And there's so many, you can call, the hotlines, you can contact them on by text if you're not
Mm-hmm.
comfortable calling. There's so many ways of doing it, but there are resources. If you're in danger, there's ways that you can find help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So find the resource that works
Do it
for
afraid.
you.
Yeah.
Do it afraid. You're going to be afraid. It doesn't matter how long you wait. It's going to be scary.
On
That
my
won't
other
change. But the thing that will change is how long it takes you to finally get the help you and healing that you deserve.
Mm-hmm. On my other podcast, people will say, because they've overcome something, and they'll say, don't be afraid. And I always say, can we not say that? Because we're going to be afraid. Let's just do it afraid.
Yeah.
Because if we wait till we're not afraid, that's probably not going to happen. I never would have. I was so terrified. I was so terrified when I went to counseling and had to say the words. It was so hard. I'm so glad I did. And I'm so grateful she believed me. Of course, she's paid to, but I just never thought for a moment that anyone would believe me.
Yeah. And it's so important to be believed. And that will help you find your real story.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
So this is where we take time and pray.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, I thank you for all your blessings, especially for your grace that is given to those freely that may or may not feel that they deserve it or have earned it, but you love them and you want them to know that your grace is there for them. And Lord, I just pray you would give anyone listening the courage and the inspiration to reach out, to know that you love them and you care for them and want them to be healed, and that there are people that can help them, people that can hear them, people that will believe them and help them to find the healing they need. And Lord, I just pray that anyone listening would take that step, not wait any longer. Just do it afraid. It's not going to get easier by waiting, and all those fears won't go away by waiting. So just do it afraid. Do it now and find the safe place to get healing and to share your story. In your name I pray.
And Father, I know that you can help change our hearts. You can help encourage us to see things different. And I know often it's hard when we do think it's our fault, because we think people say it's not your fault. And then, for instance, if you participated because you were coerced or whatever, that you feel like it was my fault. And I can't tell anyone, Lord, that you would break through that barrier, that they would know that this is just one of those messed up things, and that it's so easy to look at it at black and white, but there's so much more. And Lord, give them the courage, the strength, the wisdom to reach out to someone and get some validation so they can begin their healing. And like Kevin said, better now, better now to get on the other side of that. And I just pray that you will bring the teacher, the person that will help them, that they can talk to, that will be able to help them on their healing journey. And thank you that you're a good God. Thank you that even if we have regrets, that we can forgive ourselves, and that we can look to you because you don't hold anything against us. And we're so grateful for that. In your Son's holy name, amen.
Amen.